What?
I think if you guys weren't here last time, we're experts on this.
All righty then.
Okay. We are
Okay.
recording.
Cool. So MBT Book Club Chapter 8 or Chapter 42 of the big book?
I'm 8. I don't know.
42.
42. So our intention is to come together and just hold compassionate, loving space for one another. So there's no judgment or criticism. We don't put each other down. We just listen to really understand. We lift each other up and offer support and encouragement. Most of all, love. So let's go around and do a check-in and see what everybody thought of this chapter. Bojena, you want to start?
Well, I know I love this chapter. I did not reread it again for this meeting, and I have to admit that it's hard even for me to remember what it was all about. Even though I reread it, I read it. We talked about it, and I'm looking at it. Oh gosh, I don't even know what it's all about. I just wanted to say that Tom has such in-depth way of looking at everything that I cannot possibly, with my own might, I cannot possibly go there. With his help, I'm just basically licking the depth of it, but I still don't get it fully. So it helps to go through it again and again. And thank you for doing this again. It's such an important chapter.
I agree. How about you, Sylvia?
Yeah, I mean, I had read it and then I did skim reread it. And I think I felt like this is a chapter you could read every week.
Yeah.
And so as you get things and things sink in, then another thing pops up is really important, but you can't hold all the bits, but it just feels like something that's, at the end of the day, you could just say, love is the answer, next chapter, but then there's so much richness in the detail.
Well said. Yeah. And Daniel?
I'm like what you two said, Bojena and Sylvia. I've read it again and I've listened to it again on Audible, and there's so much stuff in there, and I think there's so much stuff that's beyond our comprehension. But we want to understand it, but we're not quite there yet. I think it just takes time for us to understand what's going on and just practice what he talks about, which is unconditional love.
Yeah.
Goal.
Yeah. Got it. And baby?
I'm just grateful that I have the opportunity to be with the group and see what your perspectives on it. It was a very difficult read. I found that at times I was literally like just highlighting the freaking whole page. I was like, why don't I just grab a spray paint of can and just like spray paint the whole thing, right? I'm just like, everything's pink, and I was like, and then I started like, instead of underlining, like actually like highlighting the words. Yeah, like there you go. So yeah, guys, I echo exactly. I'm just grateful that we can come together and share our feelings on what's going on with this. This is a great chapter. So.
Yeah, I'm really happy we're revisiting this. So for you guys weren't on the call last time, but Bojena and Daniel were, and obviously I was going through a challenge with my baby, and I almost canceled book club, right? I was like, okay, no book club today. And then you guys were like, oh, and then I'm like, okay, fine, we'll do it, but I'm not going to be fully present. And then when we came on, I was like just really emotional. But then going through this really helped me. It helped me come out of this negative space that I was in. And so the next opportunity where I was feeling charged and I felt really negative, I was trying to remember this. I'm like, what was it that we were talking about again? That really helped, but I can't remember what it was. So I'm glad that we're looking at it again, because it does really help, and it is practical and useful information that we can apply in the now.
That's awesome.
Okay, so did you guys have anything that stood out on the first page?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
Well, of course, in the middle of the first paragraph, it really talks about, and it gives it context. It says, we discuss the creation of values and the evolution upon which these possibilities begin to organize consciousness, to lower your entropy and awareness, to lead to self-intelligence, self-aware intelligence, followed by values, and ending with personality and purpose. So that really allowed me to say, okay, where have we moved from to where we're about to go to? And then when you get into the little subscript or whatever, I don't know what you would call when he goes into his little box aside. What really came to me was the second sentence. It says, to understand ego, you must first understand fear. At the deepest level, fear is generated by ignorance with a consciousness of low quality. Fear and high entropy are mutually supportive. One creates and encourages the other. So what a great segue into saying, okay, this is what we're about to jump into. And then from there, the highlighting began. So it really, you know, and, you know, as Vanessa and I, you know, we're very open in terms of the fears and insecurities that we have. And this is exactly a chapter where I'm just grateful that we're able to revisit it, because one of the things when I wasn't on the call last week and I was at the gym and I was throwing around weights and everything, I was just like, well, when do I get an opportunity to revisit this? And then last night she's like, did you read the chapter? I'm like, of course I read the chapter. She's like, okay, we get it. I'm like, yay! You know, so I'm a greenie when it comes to this stuff. I'm really encouraged to hear what you guys have to say about this chapter. So
yeah, I like how it talks about how fear and ego go hand in hand, and that one can't exist without the other. And so ego I often see as the intellect. Like when we're operating from the intellect, we're often operating from our ego space because we have so much fear, right? That colors our intellect. So if we get rid of the fear, and Tom says, when you get rid of the fear, you can still use your intellect, but now you're coming from love because you don't have any fear. So you're operating in your intellectual level with love. There's no ego there, you know? So one of the things that we've been trying to do is go deep, so that if there's something that we're disagreeing on at, let's say, superficial level, then we'll always ask ourselves, okay, what's underneath this? You know, you're never upset for the reasons you think. What's underneath this? What's the underlying fear? And all it takes is one person to go there, to go deep. And then it gives permission to the other person to also go deep and talk about their insecurities that's underlying the disagreement that seems to be on the surface level. So an example of that would be last night, we were having dinner, and I had a really emotionally charged day going back and forth with my ex-husband and custody and all this stuff. And so I'm telling B about this, and then he gets up and he leaves the dinner table, and I'm like, I got charged because I'm like, whoa, I'm telling you about all my woes, and then you just get up and leave. I don't say anything to him. I just feel the charge, and I'm like, oh my God. And then I look at myself, I'm like, okay, well, why am I feeling charged right now? I know I'm not so upset for the reasons I think. It's not because he walked away from you while you're speaking.
I did say, excuse me. I don't
remember that.
And I took her plate.
And so I'm like, okay, so what's going on? And then I'm like, oh, this is what it is. It's the fear that what I have to say is not important. The fear that I'm not good enough and nobody cares about what I have to say, that I don't have a voice.
I care.
And you do. I know. I was complaining to him all day about my ex. But yeah, so see, now I can get real instead of me blaming him. Like, you never listen to me. You just walk away, like, you know, but now I'm real and I see what the actual fear is so that I can do something with that fear and not continue to blame him for my own fear. So yeah, that's just an example about the fear and the ego.
Yeah.
It's amazing, you know, that you can actually, you're at this level that you can see it, but most of the people just don't ever look that deep. They just react based on that fear, and more, you know, disagreements happen because of that, because people, us including myself, of course, we don't understand those fears and when the roots of them and where they come from and how they rule our life. So it's amazing that we're able to do it. And I love you, Vanessa, that you're able to look that deep into it.
Oh yeah, not all the time, trust me. And it helps to be surrounded by others who are also on this journey of wanting to be real, wanting to grow, evolve the quality of their consciousness. Because when you're surrounded by people like that, it lifts you up and it rubs off on you. You know, what does Jim Rohn say? You are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. So I choose to spend my time with evolved people, you know, Tom Campbell and you guys, and, you know, and the like. So thank you.
I also think just putting myself into that situation, because I think I've had that, you know, some version of that. I totally can connect to it. And living with 3 men, it's the other thing I've had to realize is that I can't judge them by how I would act. And there's no offense to any men that are different to this, but I just think I would never do that. Like, why would someone do that? That is rude. I would never do that to someone else. But the walking away, but often men, there's a totally different meaning when they do it than if my best girlfriend did it. Like, for her, it would be a totally different, it would mean something different than if my son did it. And my son would just think, oh, there was a pause in the conversation. She's finished now, and I'm going to pick up the dishes and go to the sink. And there's nothing charged, and it's got nothing to do with me. Just has to do with how he's perceiving what I'm experiencing. And I personally find that there is often a really big difference between how men and women react in these situations. And so then there's part of me having to raise 2 young men. Like, I have a lot more compassion now than I did. And in fact, I sometimes coach the girls. I was like, look, I can see that my son is a disappointment to you in this way. Like, because particularly for the young high school kids, the girls are so much more emotionally evolved. And my kids are one-woman men. They're lovely. Like, I think they're doing great as I benchmark against other young men. But the capacity of the young women for love and romance and all this sort of stuff is just much bigger. Their appetite's a lot bigger than the capacity. And so I've always said, look, the fact that he did this for your birthday, like, you have to realize he's given you the best he got. There's not another level there. So if you want another level and you think that's what you need, then you should go out and find it. But don't misjudge that he's giving really the best of him. And so sometimes it's also a calibration of like, wow, like, why is that, that might be the most loving that person gets in that circumstance. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. And then that's where communication comes in too, right? If they want something different, then communicate that so that he knows what else to give, right?
Yeah. Or except there's 2 options. There's that. And the other option is to accept that you may not get everything from that young man in that moment, and you might need to get what you need from your girlfriends or something else. Like, it's got to be a spectrum, because at certain times when the boy's like, okay, I have finished my capacity to listen to this, beef you've had with your girlfriend. I've listened to it for 2 hours and I am now finished. I just can't do it anymore. Whereas another girlfriend might be willing to listen for another 2 hours just because of, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's also a capacity issue. So it's like, it kind of goes both ways. It's, so that's what, I was telling my kids, look, be as open and giving, but then you can also be clear about what you can give and where you are at, and don't, and so maybe sometimes you need to say, like, okay, I just, I'm sorry. I don't think I have anything else to add to this or whatever. It's hard because, what is more paramount, one person's needs or one person's capacity, and there's the balance.
Yeah, right. That goes back to what we've been talking about, is not having expectations of the other person, and then also having clear boundaries. What's okay, what's not okay, how much I can take in and be here for you, and then enough. Then I have to be strong enough to recognize my own boundaries and when I need to. Okay, personal care for me now. Yeah. Bobby was mentioning that. Do you remember when, I can't remember, we had something where I did something that he wouldn't do, and he was upset. And then he expressed himself though, and you vocalized it, and you're like, well, I get that you're not me, and I would do things differently, and just because you don't do them the way that I do them.
And that framework obviously comes from the 3 paths that we talked about, through a path of service, and through a path of as surrender, and of course the warrior path. And that's something that I've really taken with me. And to see it through Vanessa's eyes, to see it through other people's eyes, and how are they viewing the world, and what's going on for them, and that's such an important evolution for me, and showing that hopefully I'm growing up to a certain degree, and not obviously making it just about myself and how I'm seeing things. So yeah.
I think that's very powerful when you sort of step out of your own self and look at the situation from the other person's perspective. And you get a better understanding how they feel and how they're reacting, and then it allows you to process the information and sort of help the both of you come into a better consensus or a better decision for the 2 of you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree, Danny. Yeah, for sure, brother.
Communication is everything.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that shows somebody who has a big capacity to love. When you can love, when your love is encompassing and it envelopes the other person to the point where you can see the world through their eyes and not just be stuck in your own little picture of how it is for you. You have to have a big capacity to love to be able to do that. Okay, but let's get back to the book. We're on page 2. Yeah, I just had the second paragraph, very first line. Fear resides in the intent or motivation, not in the action.
Yeah.
My whole page is highlighted, so I'll pass on the you tell me what you guys, here, this is what I have.
It looks like, mine looks like that too, I think.
Thanks, Daddy. So you guys lead the way on this page. I really like the actually at the top paragraph where that sentence actually talks about point number 4 on the previous page, and it says when he or she is seriously lacking any of the first 3, fear is generated, and especially if the consciousness quality is low. So, you know, and when you look at the previous pages, it's talking about survival and material success. You know,
evolutionary pressures.
Right, evolutionary pressures, and so it's interesting to see how he's really kind of drilling down and saying this is where the essence of this information we're about to explore is coming from, and where we're about to embark on. Because Bojana, I agree with you. Like, this guy is just incredibly intelligent, and to try and follow what he's saying, and you know, and I oftentimes I try to put imagery to what he's saying to create a story. I'm just like, let me reread that again for the 10th time.
I hear you. And at the same time, reading this, where did he come up with all this knowledge to actually be able to write all this? You know,
right, to articulate what's going on in there through an analogy. Right, it's just like,
exactly.
My goodness.
And I'm just so glad to have met him through Vanessa, and just studying his works and being able to apply some of this stuff to help me become a better person as well. I find that really powerful. I talk about Tom all the time, even with people I meet. They ask me what I do, and I say I'm a coach, but very spiritual. And then we talk about things, and I bring up Tom Campbell, and then he goes, "Tell me more." They're intrigued. So it's really cool.
Yeah, just about the fear that resides in the intent or motivation, not in the action. One of the things that I'll always find ourselves doing is, if we have friction or we're charged, we always bring it back to, okay, what's our intent here? Like, what is the real intent? You know, because that is our beacon to find our way back home. It's our North Star to find, well, our intent is we want to love each other. You know, we want to connect. Our intent is not to argue and to make it about me. So once we can be clear on our intent, then it really helps us to identify what is the fear that's causing this charge, what's the fear that's causing all the chaos, and then to start doing the work to let go of that fear. And usually doing the work, it helps in partnership, because usually doing the work is we can just love each other up and, you know, and share words of affirmation to each other, and that helps to really bring us back home.
Yeah, I often say, hey, thanks for throwing me a lifeline, because when you start to when I start to explore my fears and insecurities, I'm really going into a place of an abyss. I'm in uncharted waters. Obviously, you're facing these through the warrior path. You're seeing it through other people's eyes. You're surrendering, and so it's really it's comforting to know that I can look up when I'm in the basement, so to speak, and be like, help. And Vanessa throws me a lifeline through, you know, just love and compassion, holding space, and tools that we're using, and that's a really important thing that we both have, is through exploring these insecurities and fears. For example, just coming up last night and realizing that as I'm finishing my post-grad studies, I'm not earning the amount of money that I want to be earning. And as soon as my double major is done, that obviously catapults me into another threshold of earning potential. And and we were exploring those types of insecurities in terms of saying, well, I don't feel my self-worth, and where I should be. I want to be able to buy us a house and things of that nature. And and then through her love and compassion and holding space for me, that fear is quickly resided, and we're obviously skeptical. It's still there, but you're able to work through that type of fear and insecurity. So
yeah, and one of the key components that I'm learning about holding space and being there for somebody is not to try and fix them. And usually it's the man who does that, right? So Bojana and Daniel, I'm sure you guys have seen. Sylvia, I'm not sure if you've seen, but there's this YouTube clip about the nail in the head. Have you ever seen that? The nail in the head? Okay, I'm going to send it through a WhatsApp chat. And it's so funny, you guys. I don't know if I ever told you, Bojana and Daniel, this, but when Tom was here with Pam, we were driving in my car, and Tom brought up, we were talking about YouTube. And Tom brought up, he's like, my favorite clip on YouTube is this one where this woman has a nail in her head. And I'm like, oh, that's my favorite too. And he's like, yeah, and it explains men and women, the dynamic so well. So
I did see it. I forgot what it's about, but that I do remember.
Yeah.
I remember having seen it, but not the content.
So she's got this nail in her head, and she's sitting on the couch, and she's like, I don't know what it is, but I'm always getting headaches. And
and the guy's like, maybe, and she's like, don't solve it for me.
Yeah,
Exactly.
exactly.
Be empathetic.
Yeah. Just listen to me. Don't try to fix it. You always try to fix it. And then when he finally is like, oh, that must be really hard. She's like, thank you. You get it. And then she feels heard, right?
Yeah.
So that's one of the things
That's
that I'm
funny.
learning. I always want to pull the nail out, and I always want to fix it and make it better. But I'm learning now that that's not always the case, because when I do that, you probably feel like inferior, right? Because I'm like, oh, I'm so superior. I know how to fix it. Let me fix it. You don't know. You're not capable enough. So.
Can you guys hear this?
Yeah, we can.
Tell Jerry you want a glass of water.
Thank you.
Mute it till he's done, Bojana.
I have to move to the office.
It's okay. No, just mute it. Well, if you want to move to the office.
Yeah, I'll move to the office.
Mhm.
There's noisy here.
But that's a funny recall, because every time I speak to people now, that video pops in my head. It's like, don't solve the people's problems. Let them sort of help guide them to solve it themselves.
Yeah, believe in them enough that they can fix it. They can change themselves if they wish, if they want to.
It's about inspiring them and giving them confidence to be able to do it, to step forward.
Exactly.
See, it's funny. I guess I feel like if I think about just my husband, and it's not that I try and fix things, but what I often do is I try and put up a mirror, because I can see there are certain things where he pops out of wisdom. Like, he's a very genuinely, more so than me actually, more naturally loving, open, unreactive. That's kind of his baseline. But there are certain things which pop him into a totally different mode. And a lot, like he's a rowing coach. So once he gets into that competitive mode, sometimes he drops out of wisdom. And so there are times when I'm like, look, buddy, I don't know, but if I were you, I'd be looking at this. Like, that was not quite centered in wisdom. And so,
That sounds familiar.
I'm not trying to solve the problem, because I don't care what he does with coaching the kids, but I'm like, I think you're a little out of balance here, buddy. I would spend some time thinking about that. And he does actually seem to find that useful.
Oh, good. Yeah, and you have to find what works for each person, right? That would never work for him, and it doesn't, because I've tried that.
But you know what? She does. She oftentimes says, you know what? Listen, I don't want to speak to this person, because this is a person coming from ego. I want to speak to the man that I fell in love with. And so that kind of like shakes me out. I'm like, okay. Okay. Yeah, but I guess it helps, right? So.
Yeah. But I think the thing that helps particularly, I mean, this is something that doesn't have anything to do with me. It's him and his work. And I can be like, yeah, I'd kind of think about this for a little, buddy. What are you doing here? Why are you not talking to that person? Why are you not doing this? Like, you should think about this. But then I can walk away and not care whether he does anything about it or not.
Yeah.
So that's a better thing than if it's about our relationship. I'm a little emotional and may not be as detached from the outcome, because then I actually want him to change, whether I'm trying not to be that way or not. I actually kind of do. Whereas if it's his work, I'm like, I think it'd be better for you if you thought about these issues. But you do it in your own time, honey. It's got nothing to do with me. It's easier when it's about something that's external than it's something internal within the relationship. I can be better at that.
Because you're not in the weeds. You're not.
Yeah. And I'm not attached to the outcome. If he doesn't fix it, he doesn't fix it. Like, that's up to him. You know, I can just, give him my observation. And if it's not useful and he wants to discard it, fine by me. But if it's something that's within our relationship and it's something I care about, then I'm attached to whether he listens or not. And that's, and that attachment is a challenge for me then.
Yeah, totally makes sense.
The expectations versus intentions.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so back to the second page still. Is that what we're on? Second page? Yeah, just again, one of my favorite lines in that second paragraph, a little further down, where he says that fear as a product of intent represents a state or a condition of consciousness. Fear is like a mind cancer. It is a disease of consciousness, a dysfunctional condition of ignorance, trapped within a little picture. I like that right there. Fear is a dysfunctional condition of ignorance, trapped within a little picture.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that's.
I really like that term, mind cancer, as well. I've been using it with a lot of people.
Nice.
And they look at it from a different perspective now, right? So they said, cancer, it can be beat. I can beat this.
I never thought of it that way. Yeah, good point.
I also like Danny to build on that. It's that he goes further and says it's a biological cancer.
Yes.
It's a biological cancer. Fear.
Like a biological.
Like a biological
Like
cancer.
a biological cancer.
Fear is a debilitating and destructive of the system of which it grows.
Yeah.
I just did a Google search on mind cancer. Nothing pops up. I think Tom needs to trademark that. Seriously.
Yeah, and then the next paragraph where he says, ego is a direct result of fear. Needs, wants, expectations, and desires are generated by the ego as part of its short-sighted strategy to reduce the anxiety produced by fear. Yeah. And so when we feel like we need to have something our way, and we try to control the situation to make it be, or like we want something so bad, or we desire stuff, I see it as just a distraction from actually feeling what's beneath that motivation for the need or the want or the trying to control something. So an example with that could be even like food. I desire chocolate cake. I want chocolate cake so bad. I just want it. And then I have it. But if I were to look at, okay, well, what's underneath that? Why do I want this chocolate cake so bad? What is it? What's driving this? And then I could see, I'm actually not really feeling good about myself. And I feel like if I have this chocolate cake, I'm going to feel better about myself. But then in order for me to address the fear and grow and overcome that fear, it doesn't help me to have that chocolate cake, because I'm just going to perpetuate that fear. I'm going to continue to hide it and sweep it under the rug. And you can substitute chocolate cake with anything, with, drugs, alcohol, TV, shopping, travel, even sex, whatever it might be. But it's the world that we live in. We're an addiction-driven society. It's just some are more socially accepted than others. What's that, Daniel?
Do you think that sort of instant gratification is something that you so desire to get away from what the fear is once you have it? And then when you were talking about the cake, I thought, okay, once I eat that chocolate cake, I'm going to feel so bad because now I've eaten all the sugar and now I'm going to become fat. I'm going to do this and this. Like, you kind of regret that you get that instant satisfaction, right?
Hopefully then we don't allow ourselves to feel that way, and then the next day we have another piece of chocolate cake.
The spiral.
Yeah.
My friend Ellen, who I sometimes often reference, she would always say, you know, it's part of that whole, we've been trained to think that we'll be happy if we get what we want. You know, we'll be happy if we get to eat the cake. We'll be happy if we get a new sweater. We'll be happy if we get the new house. We'll be happy if we get the garden redone, whatever, if we get the new job. And, you know, she always says, you have to remember, being happy isn't about getting what you want. Being happy is about becoming who you need to be. And
Right.
so, you know, if you don't get the house or you don't get the job or you don't get this, you still have the opportunity to become who you're supposed to be. It's just not in that thing that you thought you wanted and maybe you actually did want but didn't get. Anyway, so she always says that chocolate cake thing, it gives you that momentary, ooh, I got what I want. Or you buy the new shoes. Ooh, it gives you this momentary of like, I feel happy, I got these new shoes, but it's not lasting. And so that doesn't mean there's something wrong with it. It just means that you can't look to those momentary, like, ooh, this made me happy now, great. I was feeling unhappy. So it's really nice to get the new shoes and feel happy for a moment. But, you know, you need to work on that long-term underlying satisfaction which comes from becoming who you're meant to be rather than from getting what you want. But getting what we want does temporarily make us happy. That's why it's addictive.
Do you think we're relating happiness with a lot of materialistic things these days?
Probably.
Yeah. Yeah. That's one of the evolutionary pressures, right? In the beginning of this chapter, survival and material success. And then when we don't feel that we have that, then it creates more fear. But that's a low quality of consciousness too. You know, when we're more grown up, then we realize we don't need to compete with the Joneses. You know, we don't need to have all this material success to make us happy. That as it sounds, happiness does come from within. And then if you think about some of the happiest times, well, I don't know about you, but for me, some of the happiest moments are when I'm just completely connected to source in meditation. And that's not through having anything or, you know, being at a particular place in my life, but it's just feeling connected. That's one of the happiest times. Or connecting with my love, you know, us being connected in our unity. And just not having anything, just being out or just being home by ourselves. We're home by ourselves a lot because that's our happy place, right? And we don't need anything else. So it's not about wealth or material success. It really does come from within. Yeah.
It's great how you define what happiness is, not from a materialistic point of view, but sort of a state of being, and then you practice it. You know, you're at home. You're together.
Mm-hmm.
And Danny, I can remember as a child growing up in Samoa, I have pictures of me still playing outside barefoot in a lava, you know, looking up at the camera thinking, wow, look at this camera. It's what an amazing device. And so I remember the times when there was nothing and all you really did have was your family. And the family was what really kind of was happiness. And that's always stuck with me as I've obviously aged now, and to the point where family is number one. Everything comes and goes, money comes and goes, cars, houses, but what really is there is your family through and through. And having that understanding, it really helps me center myself and understanding what's important.
And
good awareness.
And good weather.
And good weather.
That definitely helps. It definitely helps.
I can't believe how warm it is today, or yesterday too.
Yeah, we got a heat wave going on. Love it.
Oh gosh, that's nice. I know Bajana looks like she has a suntan.
Well, yeah, I
Always look
think
like
for myself, the happy place now is with the dog. I have a new dog, so I go outside every day, and it's beautiful weather, so I get the tan. I meet other dog lovers, and I really like this stage. I never thought I would that much, but I really enjoy it.
It's awesome.
Okay, anything else on that page before we go to the third page?
Everything, babe. Everything on the page. But let's move on, obviously. So on the next page, the top paragraph, it's referring back to obviously the previous page where he's talking about how fear, the ego lives between and works and lives between the fears and desires on one side and the intellect on the other side. And then so going into the top paragraph, he goes, an individual's ego and intellect work together to develop and justify those wants, needs, desires, expectations, beliefs that are required to prevent fear from adversely affecting the functional or operative awareness of the individual. Then the key on that sentence for me is now their mission is to make sure the individual always feels good about him or herself. No ploy or deceit, as long as it can be suitably justified, is off limits. This dynamic duo's most useful strategy is to maintain a fantasy of power, significance, importance, adequacy, correctness, competency, invulnerability, superiority, righteousness, or whatever it takes to allay the anxiety produced by the fear.
Mm-hmm.
That's so good. And as you were reading that, I was recognizing that, we often justify our own needs and our own ego for being there. But not only do we justify it, but I recognize that oftentimes other people can help us to justify our own ego because they don't want us to feel uncomfortable either. So example, we facilitate a conscious coupling group, and we were sharing with them what happened at the luau. I don't know if you guys saw we did a Facebook Live video about what happened.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, if you didn't see it, so what it was is that as soon as we stepped into the venue with about a dozen volunteers to help to set up the space for the luau, I went to call Bobby in front of everybody. I went to call him to come help me. And I said, Jamal. And I called him by my ex-husband's name. And so Bobby was really upset, and he took me outside and we talked, and yeah, he was upset. And so now we're off on the wrong foot throughout the whole evening, and we were disconnected the whole night. And he was just mad that I called him that. Because what was coming up for him is, you're thinking about your ex-husband. What about me? You don't care about me, and you're thinking of him while you're with me. What about all the stuff that I do for us? And you're still thinking about him. So that's running through his mind. And I didn't make time to connect and let him know that that wasn't the case. And instead, I reacted. I'm like, what's the big deal? It was an accident. Come on, get over it. That's where I'm coming from, right? It means nothing. And so anyway, we're sharing this with our conscious coupling group, and everybody was saying to Bobby, they're like, oh yeah, no, you should be upset too. I'd be upset as well. Like, yeah, I get it. And I'm like, no, now you're justifying his ego. That was his ego that got upset. And then you recognize it, right? You're like,
yeah. And guys, it was a crazy night too, because we had to service 250 people. So
yeah, you're totally under pressure.
And we were go, and we had 2 hours before the venue opened. And I was trying to come from, okay, walk the place of surrender. Walk the place, I'm like, give me a drink.
Yeah, and then we just started drinking, made matters worse.
So,
but yeah, but yeah, that's.
Who did that help you? It said, okay, 5-minute timeout. Let's talk about this. What's going on?
Yeah, we tried, Danny, and then obviously our moms were coming over, and then aunties were coming over, and they're like, you guys, and we're like, we just need some time by ourselves.
Yeah, you should have seen it. It was like straight out of a movie when we were there. We're the only ones in the venue with 12 other of our friends and family volunteers. And I'm like, Jamal. And then everybody goes, ooh, when they heard me say that. They just knew. And then my one auntie started laughing.
Yeah, right there, that set the tone.
Yeah, exactly. So when we look at it now, I'm like, baby, that was a curveball. LCS was sending us a curveball to see how we would deal with it. Because that's never happened. That's never even come close to happening. And then right before this big event that we've been planning, it happened. So I'm like, yeah.
I think it's more situation. I mean, yes, I agree with the LCS thing, but I think it's situational. I think, maybe there was a time when you and Jamal were doing something where you were planning and you were under the gun. And that's what and so it was like a callback to just a previous experience rather than the fact that you've been, thinking about him. It was just you were in a certain mode, and maybe that just recalled a time when you were in that mode with a different person. And so it had nothing to do with anything.
And that's immediately, Sylvia, that's immediately what I said to him. I was like, it's just because Jamal and I used to be in business together, so we would work. Right? And I'm like, it's just because this is like, it's the same kind of texture of what I used to do. And, it doesn't mean, but exactly, I'm not thinking of him. I don't want to be with him. Maybe I'm with you, and so But yeah, it's just the whole about the ego, about trying to justify the ego and try to say why we're right to feel that way or why the ego should be there. And it's not, we're not the only ones that do it, but when we're around other people,
Sure.
they want us to feel good too. So they're like, no, you're right. And they justify your ego as well.
Yeah.
So it's having that awareness in a world where everybody wears a mask, everybody has their ego. It takes a lot of courage to pull yourself out of that and be like, no, that's not the way it is. I don't need to react. Where 90% of people would react, you have to be that small percentage that's like, no, I know what's right for me. Even though everybody else says I should react, no, that doesn't feel right. So what do you think, Dave?
Yeah, I think down at the bottom, it exemplifies what he's saying. Justifying our ego's wants, needs, and desires as apparently logical requirements of our continued happiness demonstrates how our intellect can become a detriment to successful consciousness evolution. That's at the bottom of the second paragraph. And it says, by justifying our beliefs, making them appear rational, our intellect becomes part of the belief trapping mechanism. And so that just echoes exactly what we were talking about and how other individuals can perpetuate this self-trapping mechanism inside the intellect by justifying your fear and insecurity and saying, no, that's okay. You should be feeling like that. And point in fact, it's being brave to step outside of yourself and coming from a place of love and compassion. Mm-hmm. It was difficult, Danny. It was difficult, Bojana and Sylvia, that I was trapped. I was trapped. And I just kept perpetuating this story, and I was like, okay, and it's these little whispers that are trying to like, no, you should be okay, and I'm like, no, you just hear this ego, just like, and then you're suppressing because you've got to service all of these patrons, and you got to put on this mask. Go, hey, how are you guys doing? Welcome to the luau. And
then I'm like, baby, I can't wear a mask. I can't. And so I'm up there and I'm just like stumbling my way through, and I'm not even getting on stage half the time. And then when he's up there, I'm like, oh, I thought we were doing this together. Now you're just running the show. Like, it was behind the scenes was so different than what everybody saw. Everybody thought we were like, oh, you guys were great. But I'm like, no, we weren't. That was our worst function ever. We were so disconnected. Yeah. But we pulled through, and it's a learning experience, right?
So what did you learn from this then?
Yeah, I think
I learned that just, Danny, when you think that you're evolving and you're maturing and growing, it's just, you just recognize that, how much more you have to continue to move and to evolve. For me, I never thought that this would have happened. I would have been trapped. I wouldn't have been able to come from a place of love and compassion. We had all of these individuals showing up, supporting low entropy and the movement that's happening. And then all of a sudden, here I am making it about myself, when in fact, I shouldn't have. And of course, I was portraying, what I needed to do to ensure that the function was going well from my perspective, but I was not there. I was not connected. As soon as I was off the stage, or I wasn't dealing with someone, in the back of my mind, I was like, how could she have done that? Why did she do that? And I was just trapped in this. I was like, give me another drink, and you just keep pushing it down, and then at the end of the night, we need to explore it. In the morning time, we broke through, and we were back home. So.
Yeah, and so then we did the Facebook Live because I didn't want us to just suppress it. I wanted us to really explore it. I didn't want to be like, okay, we're good now. I'm like, no, and I kept bringing it up. I'm like, so how did it feel when I called you my ex-husband's name? Because I don't want us to just be like, oh, we're good, I'm like, no, let's deal with this until we heal it. But Daniel, that's a really good question. What did you learn from it? And I had to actually sit with that. And I think the main thing is, to be selfless, to not make it about me. Because when he was reactive and he was upset, I was making it about me. I'm like, I couldn't see where he was coming from, because I was just like, you're being ridiculous. Like, just get over it. Come on. And I was actually laughing. I was like, I can't believe I just said that. Oh my God. And I was trying to just being light, but I was being selfish because I wasn't there for him. I wasn't able to connect with him. So the learning experience for me came down to not making it about myself and really being there for someone. And that opened me up to learning how to really hold space for somebody, is not trying to fix them. I think I've always come from this angle of, let me help you. And I think that's a positive intention. But when I'm coming from the space of, let me help you, I'm inferring that you need to be helped and something's wrong with you. But really, I want to come from this place of, I just love you exactly as you are. You don't have to change, baby. You're perfect as you are. And when he feels, then he does this to me. When he's doing that to me, I feel so safe and secure and good about myself that I actually want to improve myself, because I'm like, okay, I feel so good. I want to do more. And then I want to fix myself. But it's because he believes in me enough that I can do whatever it is that I need to do for me. And so that's what I'm learning how to do for him, is come from this place of real love, authentic, unconditional love, that I'm not trying to change him or trying to fix him.
Mm-hmm. It's an evolutionary process. Evolutionary. Who would have thought, right? Something like that would have come up, but it did, and I'm happy that it did, and we were able to work through it, and we level up.
Yeah, every time, right?
Level up, you guys.
Sounds like that incident was like, a supremely guided missile straight into the heart of a fear that you had. And so it's not surprising you had a reaction, but it's good to know that fear is there, and then figure out, you guys together, how you're gonna, release it.
And then just like the whole time he was there at the luau, right? So it was just like, and I'm like, oh my gosh.
Situation for you, even if it was totally innocent, which I totally believe it. I can't even, my husband and kids are like, are we all one person that you can't tell us apart? Because I'm constantly like, Blair, Finn, Aiden. And I literally sometimes be like, you skinny one, like, because I'm like,
and they all turn around.
And they're like, what? There's only 3 of us. But yeah, so I'm sure it was totally innocent, and I'm sure your reaction was totally genuine and, destabilizing. And so just, figuring that all. Sounds like you guys handled it really well in the post game recap.
Yeah.
We
Thank
did.
you.
We did.
And we are.
Good.
Yeah. Post. It's always ongoing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks, guys. Okay, back to the book. 3rd page. Oh, I guess we're on to the 4th page now.
We got, 15, 20 minutes, let's say?
Yeah.
I
So.
think my favorite sentence on this page was in the 1, 2, 3, 4th paragraph, last sentence. In the big picture of mind space, your power is derived from your quality of consciousness, not from your ability to force issues to resolve to your satisfaction. That's the one that I always keep coming back to when I really want to make something happen. Remembering that whether I make it happen or not is not really the objective, even as I'm working hard to some goal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then further to that, Sylvia, I like the next sentence. The intellect seldom has but a tiny fraction of the truth data required for useful logical analysis. Nevertheless, the intellect offers an illusion of being logical, as it creates a smokescreen of self-serving belief, need, and fear-based rationale to serve the ego's needs. It is in the service of the ego that the average intellect spends most of its time and energy. And that goes straight to this luau experience where, it just kept going and going and going, and I started perpetuating this story, and it was difficult, but you learn. This is why we're here, is to evolve our consciousness. This is who we are.
Yeah.
Got it. Yeah. We are emotional creatures, but we pretend to be rational and logical, and rationalize our emotions and our behaviors, but there's no need for that. We are emotional creatures. We need to just own that. We don't need to explain our behaviors. We need to just be who we are, regardless of what anybody else thinks.
And move forward, move on.
Mm-hmm.
So then building upon this experience that we were visiting at the luau, the second to last paragraph, it says, the ego, being closer to the fear, has the job of building and maintaining a feel-good fantasy barrier between the fear and the intellect. The ego, in collusion with the intellect, builds a complex delusional structure held together by convenient beliefs that justify an intricate web of interactive needs, wants, and desires. And here's the key. The ego is reactive and has no power on its own, though it has great influence by the virtue of its job of counterbalancing the fear. And so I was trapped in this ego, and I can't believe why would she say that? So I'm perpetuating the story to protect my insecurities and my fears of not being good enough. And so doing it, I'm trapped in this self-serving mind trap, and it was so difficult to get out until finally Vanessa and I had time to really connect and explore. And yeah, so crazy that we're able to revisit this chapter. It's almost like LCS is like, okay, here's your chapter, let it marinate, go through this experience, and then go to your brothers and sisters and help. Ask them for help. And I'm like, help me, help me.
We're here for you, baby.
Thanks, sis. It's crazy. You guys know how it feels when you're just, there's little whispers, but you're just stuck right here, and you're like, no, okay. And I'm a little baby in this consciousness game. So
I know. Well, I feel like for me personally, there's a spectrum, and I've gotten much better at, being able to pull myself back. But there are times when it's like, I'm at the point of no control and I don't care. And it happens less and less frequently as I get older and I learn and I practice. And I think you do mellow out as you get a little older. And I was very fiery as in my youth. And so, but, yeah, it's sometimes you're just like, when you're fully like firing in it, sometimes it almost feels good in the way that eating something that's not good for you can feel good. It's like, I just want to let loose now. I'm mad. So
yeah,
but sometimes practice less hard stuff at climbing back. Sorry, Daniel.
That's okay. Bobby, it's interesting how you talk about the whispers, and we all get the whispers, but how many times do we actually listen to it and do something with it?
Yeah, Danny, and it's so subtle.
Yes.
So subtle, and I find that if I don't meditate on a consistent basis, I'm not in tune with those whispers. The noise and the static, all this craziness in the world really suppresses those little nudges. Like, I don't know how else to explain it, but it's just.
And often what happens is our intellect comes up and rationalizes those whispers away.
Yeah. Yeah.
No,
it creates a fantasy,
it
right?
makes sense for me to do that. No, this other thing is way more logical than that.
Yeah. It creates a fantasy. It's saying, yeah, I'm good. I don't need to go further.
And that's funny that we're saying that, because on the bottom the paragraph I highlighted, the intellect has the job of justifying, approving, or blessing the construction materials, which are the beliefs, attitudes, pseudo-knowledge, and strategies of the ego. This information processing function develops whatever analysis or reasoning that is required to support the ego's needs. Developing adequate justification for the beliefs and attitudes of ego, along with developing and executing strategies and plans to support this fantasy creation and management, are the intellect's primary duties. So such a slippery slope. And I suppose this is why when we go back to the three paths, that Tom's like, hey, the path of surrender and the path of service, you're walking on a knife's edge where it's such a slippery slope, where you may think that you're actually growing up when in fact you're really just acting instead of being. Because that the intellect really, if you can't differentiate what's going, it's either going to support the role or it's going to inhibit your role of what's happening. And oftentimes what's coming up for me now is that where Tom's saying the intellect is great for logical processing, but you need to be able to come through the heart space to come through the intellect. And that's when you know that you're really growing up.
Yeah.
So.
Good point.
So anything else on that page? Where are we on? 117 now. I guess it's like
The second paragraph says, in summary, the intellect justifies and rationalizes what the ego requires to fabricate the appropriate fantasy structure that must counterbalance each fear. Your fantasy structure is a system of finely tuned personal beliefs that are specifically designed to meet your needs, wants, and desires and mollify your fears. The intellect's justification defines and legitimizes the fantasy as a rational reality.
Yeah, Danny, look, I even put square brackets around that bad boy. Square brackets.
On that one.
we're like, you know, we're just like, I told you, we should just spray painted the whole page.
Yeah, we
I
should.
really like that one because as I'm coaching clients, you and then also reading this chapter, I can sort of understand where their fears are coming from and how they created this story for themselves, which makes it feel they're okay with it. I have a client who had a fear of going in an elevator, being confined, right? So I said, well, I helped her over that. But what was even more interesting was she had the fear of going up stairways. And the way she overcame that was she would go in the stairway, put one of her shoes and lodge it in the door, go up one flight of stairs and put her other shoe in the door. Come back down, pull up the other shoe, go back up, and go to the next flight of stairs, put another shoe. She was just afraid of being confined, right? But to her, putting that shoe there, lodging it in the door, was rational. But most people would say, that's crazy, right? But to her, it was fine. Because of that, it was safe, so she was able to go up the stairs.
That's crazy, Dad. Huh?
Yeah, but that's how she overcame it, and that to her, it was great. She found a way.
And can she do it now without lodging doors open? Can she now go up and down? Yeah.
She's done so much that she feels
it was
comfortable.
like a step in the right direction.
Exactly.
Awesome.
But just hearing that from her was, you know, the first thought I thought, that's not rational. That's crazy. But I didn't tell that to her, right?
Yeah.
She let her process it, and then she was able to. I showed her some steps as to how to overcome the fear of being confined in an elevator, and she was able to do it. Actually, there was one day where she said she was on a break with her friend, and she said to her friend, "Goes, yeah, you go to the cafeteria first. I got to do something for my coach," which was going up the elevator, then come back down, then going for a break.
Aww.
But yeah, like how the ego creates all this fantasy for us to make us feel safe about it. That it's okay to do really stupid things, you know, in the views of other people, but to them it's okay.
But notice how her intellect was able to be used in a positive way to help her project forward in this trajectory, right?
Yeah.
Where the intellect is a logical deductive reasoning machine, and it allowed her to get through. And so it's going back to a couple of the pages where the intellect is kind of this thing that's being used depending on the type of consciousness that you have. And so, yeah, it's just kind of really resonating what Tom's saying is the intellect is such a powerful tool, but it's to come through the heart space through your intellect as opposed to through the ego and the fears that are driven inside the intellect.
Right. And then it's a good point that you mentioned that, because we either have the negative thought or the positive thought. With her creating this positive thought, even though she had the fear, she found a way to push through it and be able to overcome that. Whereas if you have that negative state, she would have never got off the first floor.
Yeah. Danny, you guys, I often have something that I say to myself, and I'm going to share it right now, is that do I choose to live with fear and insecurities, or do I choose to live in love? And so this is oftentimes a mantra that has just kind of come up for me, and it's a powerful tool for me, where I say, well, even when I say it, I've even switched it where I choose to say, do I choose to live in fear and insecurities? And I say that first, purposely, because then I say, or do I choose to live in love? And then I say, of course I choose to live in love. And so even the wording of that mantra is something that I've been able to use, and it just organically came to me, because every day, as you guys probably realize as well, is that as you continue to grow and grow and grow, more is heaped up onto you, right? I think Keith has said it best, is your emotional fitness continues to get stronger and stronger. You don't just go ahead and lift 50-pound dumbbells. You start with the 20s and you work your way up. It's the same way in developing our consciousness and our love and our ability for unconditional love. It starts with these little baby weights, and as you get stronger and stronger, your capacity to do more and to take on more becomes greater as well. And so that's something that just has evolved for me, and I felt impressed just to share that.
And then he looked at how fit you are emotionally is your recovery time. So something that would normally charge us, if we get charged, how long are we in that charge for? If it's a day, then, you know, that's level 1 for us. If now the same charge comes up and we're only charged for maybe half an hour, then we know we're emotionally fit. We're getting more and more fit.
But still being skeptical and saying that this is a fear, it may come up, but the traces may be there, and they're never coming from that place of ego saying, oh, we're through, we're good. So
I want to share, because we don't have that much time, can I share a quote from a little bit further along in the chapter that we're not going to get to?
Yeah.
So it's the bottom of page 124. I don't know what it is in the big book. I'm really sorry. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pages before the end of the chapter.
Yeah.
Where at the top of the page, the first 4 words are "the door is shut."
Yep.
Okay, so at the bottom, it says balance. They talk about this idea of balance. And it says balance is sometimes described as a state of being detached. This is a valuable metaphor, but we should be careful what it means. It doesn't mean that you're intellectually or emotionally withdrawn. It doesn't mean you're not interactive, uninvolved, or you don't care. It doesn't mean you're being aloof. The pursuit of consciousness quality never requires or encourages one to be detached from life or caring and being involved with others or from responsibility. It simply means you're no longer influenced by the needs, wants, desires, expectations, and beliefs. I think about this a lot, and I think about detachment. I think about it as holding things lightly. It's like you got to hold everything lightly. The doctor tells you you've got metastasized brain cancer, you have to hold that lightly. You have to hold everything lightly. And that's very different from being detached. But it's a subtle difference, but it is a difference. And I think that this idea of balance and what I'm hearing everybody talk about today is really coming through to me, thinking about, I think all of us are probably already quite good at generally being loving to others going outward. But then probably all of us, certainly myself included, sometimes we get reactive about what's happening to us. So, you know, we're good at the giving and being nice to others and never offending. And one of the things I always tell to my kids is that, you know, try never to offend anybody, but also try really hard never to be offended. And so if we can put as much energy in, you know, that, okay, that person said that, but they probably didn't mean it, or they had a hard day, or it doesn't have anything to do with me, or they just didn't realize what they were doing, or whatever. If you can do that about things that are coming towards you, as much as you are careful about how loving and you are towards other, then that creates that sense of balance. And I think we tend to focus, at least I know I do, we tend to focus more on what we're putting out there. Like, as long as we're putting good stuff out there, we're like, good. But the flip of that, and the way that you stay firmly on your ground and are less reactive, is you also have to work just as hard as that someone said something insensitive, and I'm just going to let it roll. I'm just going to let it slide. This person did that, and that was kind of rude or pushy or whatever. I'm like, you know what? That's more about them than about me. I'm going to let it slide without being a sucker. Obviously, you don't want to set yourself up for situations where people are constantly taking advantage of you. But in the moment, you know, if my son's had a bad day and he's come in and he does something, I'm like, you really shouldn't have, you know, done that. But you know what? I'm going to let it slide. And maybe later say, that wasn't very nice. You know, what's going on? But just that lack of reaction to me feels like that balance that we might be striving for.
That's mastery, you know? I mean, to get to that point, to get to that place where you don't react to what other people say or do, that's the place of mastery. And so there's a saying that I like that says, when you say that I'm offended, you're telling the world you can't handle your emotions, and so everyone else should do it for you, right? Mm-hmm. Because then when you react to what other people say or do, you're basically giving your power over. You know, you're not in a place of empowerment to be able to direct your emotions and to choose your feelings. Instead, you're at the whim of everybody else based on how they act.
It's like you're standing on one leg, and so a wind might blow you. But if you've got 2 feet on the ground, you're kind of more solid.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So thanks for sharing that as well. You articulated it perfectly. I just stopped highlighting at that point. I just draw lines down the page, Danny.
Yeah, I do these loopy things, like, you know, loop, like whole paragraph.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I would draw a line for that paragraph, and then I'd put star or double star or triple star, depending on how big of an impact it is for
Yeah.
So it is 9:21. So quick closing circle. Sylvia, you want to start?
I just love hanging out with you people. I've missed you. I'm glad that we had this chance, and I look forward to trying to put this work into practice this coming week.
Yeah, nice. Thank you. Daniel?
Yeah, again, thanks for hosting this. I learned more this week as well by just meeting with you all. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Sylvia, Danny, thank you. Brothers and sisters, man, as we're evolving through this world, it's just so awesome to connect with you guys. And I value what you guys say. You know, you guys, I look up to you guys, and I appreciate the love and encouragement and the words of wisdom that you guys have for myself and obviously for Vanessa and I. So love you guys.
Yeah.
Back at you.
Yeah, for me, I just want to just share one line, and it's from the last page, the last sentence, the very first line in that, where he says, "Love is what one ends up with after the ego's wants, needs, desires, and expectations are removed." And I just love that, because that, to me, I mean, and then in the very last part, he says, "Love is your purpose. It defines the positive direction of your growth."
Yeah.
The more we get rid of our egos and our wants and needs, we're left with is love. So, Bojana, just in time for the closing circle, Bojana, if you want to share your final thoughts and insights. Oh, when she gets So, Bojana, we were just wrapping it up in our closing circle. So we just shared, and so it's good timing. You can share your final thoughts in our closing circle with us. Can you can't hear?
Yeah, I'm back. Sorry, my battery died. That's why I needed to be in the other room. But then
Oh, that's okay. We just were wrapping it up right now. So it's closing circle, yeah. So you're on now to share with us your final thoughts.
Well, I feel like we need to go through the chapter again, because we really didn't go through the chapter. It was just so much going on. And this is such an important chapter. Thank you for allowing me to underline a few more things. So like Bob's chapter, it's all underlined now, and I really appreciate it.
Thank you, sister. Love you guys.
Love you, sis. Love you, bro.
Okay, have a great weekend. Ciao.
Ciao. Bye.